Hello everyone, I'm forecaster Jack Sillin here to discuss the severe thunderstorms that are ongoing across parts of the Northeast this afternoon. Looking at GOES East visible satellite imagery here, you can see we have this area of thunderstorm activity spanning the area from western Massachusetts through parts of southeastern New York and into parts of northeastern and central Pennsylvania. These storms are going to be moving off to the east-northeast throughout the rest of the evening, and there's a very favorable environment for severe thunderstorms out ahead of this line, so expect continued strengthening of already pretty intense storms as the afternoon and evening goes on. Farther to the north, cloud cover limiting instability in places like New Hampshire and Maine, so severe thunderstorms will not be nearly as intense up there, although you cannot rule out a damaging wind gust or two as a cold frontal boundary, which is responsible for this activity, moves off to the south and east. Looking at our HD radar imagery here out of Binghamton, New York, we can see a line of thunderstorms here stretching from the far northeastern corner of Pennsylvania back towards the west of Wilkes-Barre to the west of Bloomberg here, stretching all the way down into the central part of the state. Farther to the east here, we notice some more discrete supercellular type storms. So you can see that you have that little bit of an enhanced V signature. We'll see that better on the Albany radar, which is a little bit closer to some of these storms. And if we click the map, we can zoom in here to the far southwestern corner of Massachusetts, far northwestern corner of Connecticut here. This very strong thunderstorm moving into the area. We press the little refresh button here at the top left to check and see if there's any latest data here. And sure enough, you can see this enhanced V signature, and what's responsible for that is you actually have the thunderstorm's updraft in this area, and that's pushing air parcels towards the top of the atmosphere, and as that process continues over a longer period of time, you get air to kind of pile up near the top of the atmosphere, the top of the troposphere rather, the bottom of the stratosphere, and as that air kind of piles up, it gets blown off to the east-northeast. Again, that's due to those upper level winds out of the east, or out of the west-southwest blowing off to the east-northeast, and then you get that mass of air to kind of start sinking as it moves off down the shear vector here, and that sinking area is responsible for less intense precipitation, again downwind of that updraft. So sign of a very strong storm here, that enhanced V. You can also see a little bit of a hook echo signature, and we'll be able to see that a little bit better if we switch back to our county level view. So if we go back here to the U.S. overview, we can click the map to zoom into state level here, and then click the map again to zoom into county level. And that'll give us a good view of this thunderstorm right here. So you can see that little fish hook type signature here. That's an indication of a very strong rotation in the updraft, rotation in the low levels. This storm is actually tornado warned as I'm making this video, 3:15 in Eastern time. So that tornado warned storm, again, moving right along the Massachusetts-Connecticut border here to the north of the potential tornado, which would be located kind of at the apex of this notch here. This is the inflow notch, so that's where the storm is ingesting warm, moist, unstable air from the south, and kind of at the apex of that notch is where you'd look for any potential tornado. Do not know if that is confirmed to be on the ground at this time. And then farther to the north of the tornado's track and to the east, you're looking for this very intense rain and hail core. If we actually switch over to our vertically integrated liquid view, you can see vertically integrated liquid values above 70 kilograms per square meter. So again, while this isn't a precise guide of exactly what size the hailstones might be, anytime you see these kind of off-the-charts readings here, you can say that large hail is a pretty good bet with these storms. So watch out for large hail, damaging winds, potential tornado, again, associated with that circulation right here where Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New York come together. That is, again, moving off to the east, and we can see that if we put our loop in motion here, again, moving off to the east. Now, these supercell thunderstorms, they tend to kind of bear to the right a little bit. So instead of these, other storms that are, again, moving off to the east-northeast, these more established, more intense supercells tend to take a track a little bit farther to the right, and that has to do with how they can kind of create their own niche environment here, so they're not nearly as subject to the larger scale environment that might drive a weaker system. These thunderstorms can actually carve out their own little, again, their little bubble of a slightly different environment as they both propagate and are kind of directed by those winds. So that's why you have these more intense thunderstorms moving a little bit more to the east-southeast, and then the weaker thunderstorms moving off to the east-northeast. Now, in addition to all the severe weather, of course, lightning, big threat with these storms. You can see plenty of strikes getting picked up by our lightning detection network. If you, again, since we're in county view here, you can press any one of these strike icons to get much more detailed information. Here's a street level map. You can see how intense the strike was, both in terms of kiloamps and in terms of a kind of subjective, what you would feel or experience if you were in the vicinity of the strike. Again, the time, and you can feel free to pan and zoom this map to get a little bit more context into where some of these strikes are hitting. So as we move forward into the latter part of this evening, we continue to have an extremely favorable environment for severe thunderstorms here across, again, parts of southern New England, parts of southeastern New York, and northern parts of the mid-Atlantic states. ECMWS thunderstorm composite map showing plenty of instability in this area. Again, instability a little bit more limited as you move farther to the north, closer to the frontal boundary itself, so severe thunderstorms won't be nearly as intense up there. As we head farther to the south, you can see this area of deep instability, and the more important thing perhaps is these upper level winds. You can see we have upper level wind or surface winds here fairly weak out of the south-southwest, but as soon as you get up into the mid and upper levels, we have very, very strong winds. Here you can see these green vectors, a very long indicating strong winds, and these strong winds are helping to organize storms into these into the line that we saw here and into the supercells that we've seen up here, and those winds will continue to mix down to the surface. So primary threat, especially with that line of storms back in Pennsylvania, will be damaging winds. The supercells that are forming kind of along this boundary here, and we can actually see that boundary a little bit better if we look at some of the surface wind forecasts. You can see this little boundary right here, and it'll actually show it better if we look at a higher resolution model. Like the NAM here, you can see this boundary, and the storms forming along that boundary, moving along that boundary, are going to have that rotational energy to tap into. And if you're looking to kind of quantify that rotational energy, check out the storm relative helicity parameter. That's what's going to give you your kind of measure of rotational energy, and you can see there's plenty of it up here in southern New England. A little bit less so as you head farther back to the south and west, away from that boundary. So that's why these storms down here will be primarily damaging wind threats, while these storms up here could pose a slightly broader array of threats, including large hail and tornadoes, as well as that damaging wind threat. All thunderstorms, of course, pose lightning pose a lightning threat. So even if the thunderstorms aren't necessarily severe warned or match the Weather Service's severe criteria, watch out for lightning as they move off to the east. Speaking of the air masses here, you can see that with our observations from a little earlier this afternoon, you can see just how favorable this environment is, even all the way towards the coastline. So typically, with a setup like this, you get much cooler temperatures here in the Boston, Providence area. But if we click the map and zoom in a little bit, you can see that the temperatures here are in the 80s. So not really worrying about much of a marine influence until you get out towards Cape Cod and the islands, eastern Long Island, the south shore of Connecticut, going to see that marine influence a little bit, but storms should stay strong as they move into the Hartford area, into Providence, and towards Boston. Speaking of the forecast, we can see the simulated radar imagery here from weathermodels.com, so log into your portal here to access these maps. And I'm going to load up the latest run of the HRRR here. Again, this is not intended to be a precise forecast to show you exactly which towns might get hit by a severe thunderstorm and which towns might be spared, but rather this is intended much more as a general overview, so get a sense of the overall evolution of the pattern as we head through the next few hours. So here we are at 3 o'clock. We have that line of storms here, the supercells up here. That matches up fairly well with the radar imagery that we've seen. As we move later into the evening, expect activity to fill in up here near the Massachusetts-New Hampshire border. Again, these storms primarily damaging wind threats, and the wind threat up here considerably less than the wind threat down here. You can see this kind of bow echo signature, and that is indicative of very strong wind potential. So watching that northern New Jersey, northeastern Pennsylvania, southeastern New York, area for damaging winds, widespread damaging winds before the storms move off into Connecticut. We'll still be watching out ahead of that line to see how those supercells that we were watching near this kind of triple point between Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York. We'll see how those supercells continue to develop as they move east. And then as we head later on into the evening, storms will make it off towards the southern New England coastline and farther south down here into New Jersey, the Philadelphia area in for some storms, as well as Baltimore and Washington. Those storms, again, damaging winds being the primary threat with those, and then storms up here in New England will weaken as they encounter that marine layer near Cape Cod. So that's an idea of what to expect over the next few hours. You can track the storms with all the tools that we have at weather.us. The lightning analysis here, we have our HD radar, we have the vertically integrated liquid, and of course we have Goes East satellite imagery. So you have all the tools that you need here at weather.us to stay ahead of all the storms. Here's a look at some of the impressive water vapor satellite imagery that we're getting now. You can use the menus to the left of the images here to toggle back and forth between various satellite views and explore those at your leisure. That's it for me for now. I'll have more updates later on this evening, both on Twitter and on Facebook. You can find me at Jack Sillin and at weather.us. That's it for me for now. Thanks for watching.